Hey HTDA, and welcome to my spoiler-free step-by-step guide to Techtonica. This game is as much about building a factory as it is about the story, so I will try to give you as much tips and tricks as possible to keep you on track without ruining the exploration and story for you. That said, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. First of all, a couple of tips. You definitely want to pay close attention to your minimap. It will show you everything you need to know about your environment. For example, you can see this corridor over here, the tiny little wall in between this open area and this corridor. So punching through here will give you immediate access to this entire corridor and all the goodies that are behind it. So things like that are definitely worth checking out. You also want to get into the habit early on of picking every single type of plant you see around, because you're going to need all that fuel to power your machines for the first couple of hours. The first thing you want to do is set up a couple of these mining drills close to the iron ore that you have on the wall, and you can open them up and throw some fuel in there, just some of the plants that you've been collecting. And keep in mind, if you don't want to throw in an entire stack at once, you can just right click that stack and pick up half of that, so you can use that somewhere else, or for example fuel a couple more of these miners. I recommend setting up at least 2 miners at both the iron as well as the copper ore. Another tip that is already on the screen, but it's very easy to miss and that will save you a lot of time, is that whenever you have a building selected, if you press space bar, you will automatically loot everything that building is producing. Alright, back to the building, dump some ore into there and repair the terminal. Build yourself a scanner under the equipment tab, then go around the entire area scanning all the old machines that you find laying around, open all the storage boxes and collect as much plant fuel as you can while doing that. Next up, you want to unlock the smelter, and in order to do that you're going to need to craft yourself a couple of these research cores. In order for these to actually count towards your research progress, you're going to need to place them down on the ground. Whenever you place them down, you'll see them becoming available in the bottom of your technology tree, and if you actually pick them back up, they will start going in the mine. So you need to keep them out somewhere around your factory in order for them to count. Anyway, go ahead and unlock the smelter. Build a couple of smelters, put them down 1 block away from the actual miners, and then throw in some fuel, throw in your ore, and voila, you have your ingot production up and running. Of course, do the same thing with your copper ingots as well. Get yourself some ingots and throw them in the terminal in order to upgrade it. You can now make conveyors, inserters, and storage units, which is going to go a very long way to automating your facility. If you want to optimize your production lines, you can actually look at the bottom left of your screen when selecting a production unit, because it will actually tell you how much stuff is going to go in and out of that particular machine. So for example, the mining drill is going to be producing 10 ore per minute, and if you check out the smelter, it's going to require 15 ore per minute. So if you have 3 mining machines, those will be producing 30 per minute in total, 3 times 10. And then 2 smelters are going to be able to consume all of that and produce the maximum amount of ingots from those 3 miners. So that is going to then produce a total of 2 times 4 iron ingots per minute, for a total of 8 iron ingots per minute that you can then put on a belt, something like this, and then put in a nice little storage unit for easy access. Even though this game doesn't necessarily want you to overdo your production, it's at least not in the early game, it's definitely worth setting up a base production for iron and copper, because you're going to need loads of that stuff. But anyway, make some more conveyors and inserters and put them in the terminal to upgrade it once again. Follow the story bit that pops up, make sure you explore thoroughly, there's a lot of items to pick up, and then make sure that you place down some more research cores to unlock the excavator bit in the mole. Craft yourself one of those moles, and then punch yourself a hole through the wall to the actual elevator. Now keep in mind that if you use the mole for too long, it generates heat, so then it will overheat, but if you take a little pause in between using it, it won't actually overheat, so it's a lot faster and easier to use. Now, as the game suggests, start making some of these excavator bits in order to put them into the freight elevator and start digging your way up. Now, while you're waiting, I suggest that you run a conveyor belt from your production units to the actual elevator, and then put a inserter in there, and then press E when hovering over the 1 mark to turn it into 2, because this will actually let you transport your resources from this level to the next one. Hop on the elevator and go to level 2 so we can start building a real factory. Once you're up there, there's a couple of inserters you can scan, so make sure you do that. Also, don't forget that those resources you were producing on the first level are actually still being transported to the second level, so you can find them in the elevator just waiting for you right here. I recommend that you go to the north side of the elevator and punch yourself a hole through the wall right there. Visit the new station, make sure you explore thoroughly, make sure you scan everything, pick up all the resources, and then make sure that you unlock the assembler as well as the crank generator and the crank connect upgrade. Craft yourself a single assembler and make sure you have at least one crank generator as well. Build yourself a nice little floor and then place some of these crank generators on top of that. Now, thanks to the upgrade, you can actually chain them together, so you only need to click one, activate the crank, and then they will all start powering your facility through the floor. Then build a very simple setup, something like this, just with a assembler, some of these inserters to get stuff out of the assembler, and then put it into a storage box. This is going to be the blueprint of your mall. You don't necessarily want to automate producing everything in this game, but you do want to make sure that you produce whatever you're going to be using through an assembler, because this will literally give you twice as much output compared to doing it by yourself by handcrafting. So for example, we need some more assemblers. Well, then we might as well just throw some of these inserters and frames in here and then get twice as many assemblers compared to making them ourselves. It is especially important that you maximize the production that you get from your ingot. So for example, making some of this copper wire through an assembler is going to get you twice as much compared to making it yourself. So make sure that you try and avoid handcrafting wherever you can, but of course if you want to speed things up every now and then, that is okay to do as well. So at this point we have miners and smelters that need fuel, we have assemblers that need power, but we only have crank generators at which we need to click every 10 minutes. So all in all, that doesn't really feel like an automated facility. So we need some more technology before we can really start scaling things up. So make some of these crank generators and assemblers, throw them in the machine and upgrade the terminal. Set up some more assemblers to get the other basic products going, and then use those to start making some research cores. While those are being produced, set up another assembler and link that up to your lift in order to make some of these drill bits completely automated, and again at a 2-for-1 ratio. By making sure those drill boats go straight into the excavator, you can automate your drilling, which will take some time, so you might as well get it started. In the meanwhile, you will have some of those cores available, so place them down and then unlock the crank span. This will upgrade the duration of your crank spans to 60 minutes, so that's a whole lot better than the 10 minutes we had before. While we're waiting for the drilling to level 3 to complete, we might as well set up a new mining facility. This facility is just meant to get all those basic resources completely automated. Well, not completely automated because we still have the fuel issue and we have the crank issue, but mostly automated anyway. So we have 3 miners, we have 3 smelters, and then we have 1 machine making each type of basic copper product. This is not going to be fast, it's not going to be optimized, but it will get your production going so you don't have to stand around waiting for it to be produced when you actually need it. Every now and then, check back at level 1, you can just teleport there and make sure you refuel your miners and smelters. And then you should find that level 3 has been unlocked. Level 3 is mostly about the story, about exploring, and about getting a couple of new technologies. So make sure you explore thoroughly, you scan everything, and also don't forget to pick up a lot of the buildings that you will find there so you can bring them back and reuse them elsewhere. Once you get back from level 3, you should be able to unlock the planter, the thresher, and some of the materials that you can make with those buildings. If you haven't done so yet, I also recommend that you now pick up the filter inserter and the long inserter, as well as the hover pack to make your life a lot easier getting around and building your factory. Unlike in some other game I recently played, the hover pack is completely free, doesn't cost any fuel, it doesn't go up that high just yet, but it's high enough to make building your factory, like I said, a lot easier, and you can actually just fly around the terrain with it as well. Okie dokie, so let's make a very simple setup that will allow us to produce infinite fuel for our miners and smelters, so that we then only have to worry about electrical power moving forward. And here we go, this is the one build that is going to basically solve all your fuel problems for the rest of the game if you wanted to. And there's going to be more advanced versions of this, but honestly, you can get very far with just using this simple layout. So all we have here are a total of 10 planters filled with kindle vine. Now kindle vine is going to grow in 4 minutes into a new plant, and in order to do that, all you need to do is first harvest some kindle vine somewhere out in the wilds. The first stone is full of that. Put them into the thresher, and then it will be transformed into a seed and a stem. I'll get back to the stems in a moment, but the seeds you want to put back on a belt As you can see, I have a full ring out here in the edges of this build. And these are going to be pulled out by a filter inserter. I have set this filter inserter to just extract the kindlevine seeds, so not the stems, just the seeds. And those are going to go back on this belt and then are going to be put back into these planters. So basically, once you harvest kindlevine and you transform it back into a seed, you can plant it again, transform it back into a seed, plant it again, and so on. You don't actually lose any kindlevine that way, so this is an infinite way of producing more kindlevine. Now, that by itself is not that useful, but the side product of that is these stems. And these stems are a pretty efficient fuel. I'll get back to the stems in a moment, but first of all, make sure you realize that you are putting back the kindlevine on this belt over here, and then the seeds on the outside are going to be transported in, like I just said. However, you do need more than just a single filling of seeds on this belt in order for this to work, because you don't want these, as you can see, for example, is happening over here, you don't want these planters to sit empty for too long, because that will break the efficiency of your build. This is also why the belt is actually running in a circle, just to avoid all the seeds getting stuck at the end of the build rather than being able to be used anywhere. It's also worth noting that this build costs quite a bit of power, electrical power in this case. You need about 2400 power in order to fuel all of that, and that means you're going to need a total of 16 crank generators to make sure this is running non-stop. That's not really a problem, you only need to do this once and then you set them up, and then you just need to click them once per hour. It's not a lot of effort, but you just need to make sure you have that set up. Now, once you have set that all up, you actually have a production of 30 stems per minute. That's enough to fuel 50 miners, so 50 miners, or a total of 15 smelters. In other words, that's plenty to fuel everything we have in terms of mining production so far, and then quite a bit to spare, and all of that from this single build that we can pretty much just copy paste whenever we need more fuel. This little setup is going to allow us to now start doing some pretty awesome things. For example, rather than just importing stuff from the first level, we can now start exporting our fuel there. In order to make use of all of this fuel, we're going to need some of these long inserters as well, so make sure you make some, and please make them in a assembler. A very simple infinite mining setup looks something like this. Just like before, we have 3 miners and 2 smelters, but this time around we have a second belt in between there with fuel. We have these long inserters grabbing the stuff from the belt that is one further away than usual. This one is picking up the fuel for the miners, and this one is actually picking up the ore from the ore belt. But that's all there is to it. This is actually a completely self-sufficient build. It doesn't need any power, most notably. So as long as you have fuel coming in, and we are producing more fuel than we need for the moment. So this is going to run for a very long time, and it's going to be non-stop producing, in this case, iron ore. Now, you will be upgrading your miners and smelters as we go along. There's upgrades that kind of throw off the ratios. So just be prepared to add in more miners, more smelters, whatever you need. It is worth keeping in mind that, for example, over here we have the long inserters that have a maximum speed of 15 items per minute for the moment, and that's exactly as much as we need for the input for a fully operational smelter. So keep in mind the inputs and outputs in terms of how many how many inserters you have, and the different types of inserters do have different rates. So the normal ones have 20 items per minute, the long ones have 15 items per minute. The filter inserter ones, I believe, have 30 per minute, and so on. So you do need to take that into consideration. But all in all, this is a pretty straightforward setup. And as you can see, we are now putting stuff on a belt. And I do want to emphasize the singular belt that I just mentioned, because right now we can actually just combine the outputs that we're going to be bringing into the elevator, because the elevator doesn't care if things are on the same belt or not. So that actually simplifies the in and output from your elevator, but also towards your elevator, especially towards your elevator, because you will need to split some of the items maybe when you deliver them. But this makes it very easy to recombine certain production lines on different levels. Also keep in mind that things like mergers and splitters for belts are automatically generated by the game. So if I want to merge something, all I need to do is make a new belt and it will get a merger there anyway. And if I want to split up something from this belt, all I need to do is make a belt go away from there. Then once you remove this, the splitters and merges will stay in place, so that's a little annoying, but it doesn't take that long to just replace the belts if you need to. Another thing in Techtonica that was a very nice touch of the developers is that the fuel that is actually put into the smelter by the inserters is limited to only a couple of items. So as you can see, there's only 3 of these sticks going in, even though the entire belt is full. So even though you can put in a ridiculous amount, by default the inserters will only take kind of what they need from the belt and let all the other fuel move onwards to the next miners and smelters. At this point you might be tempted to just start automating everything we can right now. But honestly, that's kind of a trap in Techtonica, because if you look at how much resource you actually need to produce some of this stuff, you're going to be shocked. So for example, I have here the Mark I drill bit, a very simple thing that we are definitely going to want a lot of. But if you look at the production that the assembler requires, it's actually 20 copper ore ingots per minute, along with 10 of those for the iron version. Now, 20 copper ingots per minute is actually a lot more than what we're currently producing, and that is just for this single type of production. We also want copper wire and all kinds of other copper stuff, so we want to make sure we are splitting our production a little bit between all of that. So for the moment I will actually recommend keeping things small as you're scaling your production up, because otherwise you're going to be producing a whole lot of different things at the same time. The resources are going to be spread all over the place and you're actually not going to get much done at all. So for example, we're producing those stems now that we're using for fuel, but we also need some of these stems to go back into a thresher and then be transformed into kindle vine extract as well as plant fiber. Now that fiber is then going to go into an assembler and be turned into these plant matter frames. We're going to need those frames in order to not only produce the excavator bit Mark II, which is a lot more efficient than the Mark I version, but we're also going to need those frames for a lot of other things. So we don't just want these to be completely absorbed by the excavator bit production. By setting up small dedicated production facilities that are required to be manually fed, but honestly this game it doesn't have a huge scale, so manually feeding some of the machines is not going to be a big deal, at least not for now. You can easily control what products are going to go where. So for example, I'm producing the Mark I bits over here. By the way, if you press Alt, you can turn on and off the visuals, the icons on the building, so you can easily see what's going to be transported where. You can also see that this building requires, because I have the filter inserters here, some copper ingots and iron ingots. I can just put a whole lot of these in a storage unit like this, and then it will automate this production for a considerable time. Now similarly, if you have buildings that need, or production things that need multiple inputs, you can just put a couple of storage units like this. For example, the Mark II bits require 3 different things, and then I can put some of the frames directly in here. But if I have like resources, for example the Mark I bits, let me pick up a couple of these. As you can see, they only stack to 5, so if I try to put those directly into the machine, I can only put 5 in here. If I just put them in the box like this, then this will make sure I have this automated for quite a little while. But I also stock up my resources elsewhere, so I can also start producing miners, drills, planters, etc, etc, etc. Another reason not to massively scale up your production just yet is because we're still relying on these manual crank generators. Now of course we only need to press them once every hour, and well, we can build plenty of them, but all in all it's not really a convenient way to start mass producing stuff if we are going to need to spam these all over the place and we need to keep clicking them. However, that is where we are going to be mass producing these Mark II drill bits for, because at the next level we're going to find a lot of the solutions to our current problems, I would say. However, that is going to be in the next episode. I hope you found this useful. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, because there's going to be plenty more after this. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. And if you're still here, you are awesome. I do hope to catch you in the next one.